some people have this tendency to try and kind of paint you as a political band, but it always felt to me like instead of writing songs about the strange external world that we live in, you were kind of talking more about the direct impact upon the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there, really. Yeah, it's more sort of internal monologue, musings, and you're totally right how a person is psychologically affected by the society, especially the constructs that we've got around us at the moment. So I quite often tell people that, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, that we're more a psychological band than we are a political band. But yeah, that's the way you summarised it's perfect. That's it.
When did you first feel that these emotions that you were experiencing as a result of the world we live in, whether that be, angst or confusion or hope even, why did you feel that these feelings were worth expressing in music and kind of exploring in that domain?
Yeah, well, for me, that's been the number one reason I've ever made music, really. Like this band is the first band I've ever done vocals in. So that's completely new to me. So I suppose I've been a drummer since the age of 15, so I was always the drummer in the bands I've been in. So then I suppose all of a sudden kind of writing lyrics was a very, very alien concept to me, but music was always like a really cathartic release. Like it made me feel better. Just, as simple as that. So I suppose when it came to starting to write lyrics, I kind of somewhere in my mind joined the dots, I suppose, and that's why it's more kind of, the lyrics are more reflective, I suppose, rather than commentaries of society.
It's interesting what you're saying about you used to be a drummer. Does the catharsis differ on stage when you're at the front of the stage as opposed to on the drum kit?
No, not really. I mean, it's something that took getting used to, because I was used to obviously being at the back of the stage and just being behind the drum kit, and obviously, not having a microphone, not really needing to engage too much with the audience. Well, you're still engaging, you're still playing, and you're still putting on a performance, but it's not quite the same, I suppose. So it's something that took a little bit of getting used to. And like the early days of Pigs, I was wearing this like huge multicolored caftan with the hood up. I spent a lot of time with my back to the audience, and gradually over time I suppose became more at ease and more comfortable with kind of presenting myself a bit more. But it did take a little bit of time, but there was like, over time I began to realise that like nobody really goes to a gig to see anyone fuck up or heckle or things like that. Like everyone's there to have a good time, right? So, and you're there to have a good time playing your music, so everyone's kind of in the same boat. So when you kind of start to create that narrative in your mind, things become a little bit less scary when you've got to stand up in front of people. Really, it kind of breaks down those barriers anyway in terms of performance. And plus, like, in terms of the level of catharsism, like obviously drumming, it's a really, really physical instrument. But also vocals, I mean, you don't get much more physical than that, really. So in that regard, they're almost the same in a way. Like it's a really physical sensation from, especially like the vocals that I need to do in Pigs. It's like a head to toe kind of physical workout. So yeah, in that sense, it's weirdly similar.
Yeah, you got to dig deep. It's interesting, that kind of sentiment you were saying there about, becoming more comfortable and confident on stage. Is that something that's kind of similarly echoed in the music itself? Like, do you feel like you've become more comfortable and confident in the soundscape that you're crafting and the sound of the band since the first record?
I think so. I think we're at least more aware of the things that we do really well, and have kind of gradually honed in more and more on those, and kind of, just let go of the things that we maybe weren't so good at. Or with that same sentiment, though, there are certainly things that we learnt that we were really, really good, or at least that it felt really natural to do. And that's the kind of thing where we kind of end up sort of getting really repetitive and repeating things a lot, because like from a sense of being a musician and the performance and the sonics of what we're doing, you can get really, really lost in that, and that's a really wonderful thing. And we still do that, but it's something that I think we at some point we realised that that's something that we can do with ease. And actually, if we kind of reel that in a bit, when we do kind of let things off the leash like that, on the odd occasion that we allow ourselves to do that now, it becomes a lot more effective, and it feels like it's a lot more meaningful when we do it. There's a lot more impact. We've been a band for a long time now, really. I mean, we started to get a lot of extra promotion and a lot of extra ears on the band around the time we released King of Cowards, but we put out Feed the Rats, our debut album, maybe like a year and a half before that. And before that, we were a band for 4 years, and we just didn't release an album. We were just going out and doing gigs, and that's all we did for 4 years. So we've had a long time to really sharpen things and experiment and work out what feels good.
You want to make sure you've put that work in, though, in that time before you get to the stage when a light starts to get shone on it. By waiting those 4 years to kind of sharpen your teeth. So then once it does start to catch a light, it's easier to progress, maybe, and kind of experiment.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not really like we were following any particular blueprint or had any particular long-term goals for the band, really. It was just a case of being inspired by certainly a lot of the psych and the noise rock bands that were and are still active in the UK. Like there was so many bands of that kind of ilk passing through Newcastle. We'd go and watch them play, and like festivals like Supersonic and Super Normal and Desert Fest and Raw Power, like things like that. Like they were always kind of, I suppose, in terms of like goals, they were always our goals when we started the band. It was like, well, we love those festivals. We love all of the bands that play those festivals. We really want to play those festivals, and we really just want to get out and gig with those bands as well that we were inspired by. So yeah, things just kind of rolled on from there, really.
What goals do you have now that you've achieved some of those things?
Just playing in a pub now. I think the goals have been amended since the pandemic came in. I mean, I think it's important to set yourself little goals and little ambitions, because I think that's healthy. But I also think for musicians it can quite quickly become unhealthy. I mean, I've been in bands in the past before where, or we've maybe developed unrealistic expectations as to where, we thought the band could be, or what the band could achieve, when really you've kind of you've just got to hold on to the fundamental of like, why am I in this band? Why am I making this music? And as long as you can do that, things become a lot easier. I kind of think of Pigs as a, in terms of achievements anyway, I feel like we are maybe like a League One football team. I was trying to think of a suitable league there. I didn't want to go too low, but I didn't want to go too high either. A League One football team that's gone on a really good FA Cup run, and we're suddenly like we've got into the quarterfinals against the odds, and we're like, well, do you know what? We've drawn Villa at home. Maybe we can get to the semi-final. So in terms of like the way we plan things, it's really, really step by step, and like, oh wow, those amazing things happened on the last album, so it'd be great to replicate those, and maybe we can do these the next time. So you kind of look, I don't know, for me, that the greatest joy I get from being in the band is the live shows, and it's been so nice to have with each album the live shows kind of just grow and get bigger in terms of audience and capacity, and the size of the PA and the lighting and the things that we can do visually live. That's always enhancing with every album. So I suppose that's like that they're the main set of goals I think that we always drive towards. It's like how do we get the live shows to be bigger and better on the next release. So I suppose they're the goals, I guess.
Yeah, it must be a strange thing when you've got such a massive soundscape when you start off and you're trying to make that work in tiny little basements and stuff.
Yeah, we just used to make like amps explode and things. Like the first the first like I think year of our existence, it became a bit of a mid performance ritual. So one of the guitarists' amps would just blow halfway through the set, and I'd have to run around the venue trying to plead with one of the other bands to borrow a guitar head for the rest of the set, which usually, people were kind to us and lent us gear when ours went boom. So I don't know, we just kind of we just did it. Like, it's strange to think we played in some really, really small venues like when we started out, and we played at pretty much the same volume that we play now. Obviously, like, the bigger venues have got bigger PA systems to fill that space, but on stage we're playing at the same volume we played when we started out. Only when we started out, people would be stood like 3 feet away from the guitar cabs, which probably did them no good, really.
When you're in the studio, do you track most of it live?
Kind of. It's kind of 50-50. So what we do is Sam, Johnny, the bass player, and Chris, the drummer, they will play the bones of the track live. And then what we do from there, obviously you've got like the drum sound, but the guitar cabs, they're isolated from the drums, so they're in a different room. So you just kind of, Sam's always really keen on capturing like a really, really big drum sound, and to do that you can't really have the cabs in the same room, because it muddies obviously the drum mics will start to pick up the cabs and things. But then after that we kind of go through a process of reamping things, sometimes several times. So just play the bass takes through an amp in the live room, and that's cranked up to a level that is pretty much the kind of live level. We kind of do it live, but also there's plenty of overdubs and things done as well. I mean, not too many, we don't go crazy, but obviously the vocals are done separately, the synth's done separately, and any kind of additional stuff we want to put on, just little bits of saxophone here and there, that all gets overdubbed.
Cowbell.
and the one cowbell strike in the album,
what was it, 20% you had written before you went into the studio on this record? Do you have a rough idea of the trajectory of where you want it to go before you head in, or is a lot of it just allowing it to breathe and be free in that space and take on a life of its own?
Yeah, we probably had more of it written than that, really. Certainly there were gaps in terms of the lyrics that I needed to write. Some of the songs structurally were things that were massaged a lot in the studio. So, in terms of like the core elements of the songs were there. It was just a case of deciding where to kind of push and where to pull things, really, and just listen back to recordings and just think, oh well, maybe that section could be a bit shorter, or maybe that section could be a bit longer, or maybe that section needs to kind of push a bit harder in terms of the tempo, and this bit needs to pull back a bit. So there was a lot of, in terms of smoothing out the songs, a lot of that was done in the studio, but like the majority of the riffs were there. But I mean, the biggest shame of it all, I think, was like we've not been able to play most of those songs live. So with the other records, with Feed the Rats and King of Cowards, we played maybe a bit less so with King of Cowards, but we still managed to do a few shows where we kind of road tested a lot of the songs on that album, whereas this one, we didn't have that luxury. But, it was okay because we had loads of tour dates booked in after after the album release. So a lot of those songs haven't been played. Like we played Crazy in Blood got its fair amount of road testing, but I think we played Reducer twice, and then the rest of the songs just we haven't played them outside of the studio. So we're probably gonna have to relearn them and and make little amendments here and there. We sometimes do that in terms of like trying to fit songs into the live sets. Obviously, some of them are pretty long, so we might need to tailor those a bit so we can get more mileage out of running through the catalogue. But
How, well, what you were saying there at the start about the idea of push and pull and that kind of occurring in the studio. How did that function on something like Halloween Balsam? Kind of one of the biggest songs on the record, but one that has probably the most sense of kind of dynamics and the waves of kind of massive peaks, and then it kind of drops down and is proper reined in.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's something like back to what I was saying at the start. That's something we've kind of worked on over time. Like if you go through like King of Cowards, maybe there are those kind of little moments of like dynamic build and things like that, and I think that's definitely something that we started to explore a bit on King of Cowards, and then it was definitely something that we wanted to explore further in Viscerals. So yeah, I suppose it wasn't so much a sense of we weren't approaching it fresh. It was already like something that we'd been practicing with those other songs, I guess. But it was just a case of paying more attention to those elements of our songwriting with Viscerals. And again, with the next record, I mean, we've barely written anything really, but individually we've got little bits of ideas, and I would expect that's something that we will explore even further in the next one, because we're really good at kind of going like full octane, really really loud, really full on, and just in your face for like 4 or 5 minutes, and that's great. Like we love doing that, but the dynamics of things, that's something that we're still kind of exploring, and I think there's still plenty more for us to explore. I kind of got to give like Sam a lot of credit in terms of like the way he produces our albums. So Sam's our guitarist, but he engineers and produces our records as well. He runs a studio in Newcastle where we do all our recording, and he always has like a very, very clear idea as to how he would like to approach producing and engineering the album, in terms of giving it a different character to the album previous, and also to find ways in which you can make the music more dynamic. I think it'd be just really easy for us to just, like I say, go just like flat out for like 40 minutes start to finish of the album, but Sam's always looking for those points where he can really kind of make the most of the dynamics of what we're doing in a production sense, and give the album like a real kind of flow, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like Blood and Butter as well. You couldn't imagine that on one of the other records, but it's a point where you completely slow it down and take everything out.
Yeah. And that was intentional. I mean, that was something that came about just at the very, very start of the recording. We were cracking on recording the songs, and again, that was one of Sam's ideas. He kind of said, "Oh, it'd be amazing to kind of put something quite abstract in the album that kind of brings it dynamically quite down and brings the tone like straight back down as well." And I think it works really well in that sense. We just let Chris like go crazy on the drums in the live room for like 15 minutes, and just chopped up loads of different drum loops, and then we just messed about with synthesizers, and it was quite nice penning the lyrics over that, because it was like I didn't really have anything much to hold on to in terms of like structure or like rhythm of riffs or rhythm of drums, where the vocals would usually play around those. But with that, it felt like a bit like a blank canvas, which was quite nice to just kind of let myself loose on that.
Is that why it took on a totally different vocal style as well?
Yeah, probably. Although saying that, I mean, the music itself, it dictates really what the vocals are gonna do, and I think it would have been very odd if I started really hollering over that. So yeah, a more kind of spoken word approach. And I'm not blessed with the most dulcet of of singing voices. So yeah, taking a spoken word approach was definitely the way to go with it, I think.
Is that the one that's about Greg's?
It's about Greg's. I mean, it could be about Greg's.
I heard
Is that
one of the songs in the record is about Greg's, and that felt like the one that kind of lined up for me.
It's not necessarily about Greg's, but I think that's probably something strange we've said to someone somewhere, and it's been published. But that, yeah, it's about Greg.
I mean, in a more serious note, it kind of does take on a new resonance in the light of the food parcel scandal.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it's really that kind of touch. Everyone knows what's happening. Just people are getting sold out all over the shop, really, and it's usually people at the lower end of the income scale that are the ones that, well, they are the ones that suffer most. It's just this idea of just, everyone. It's just people cutting corners for profit, and it's not really having anyone else's best interests at heart. It's just a kind of money saving exercise whenever they've got to provide any, and you say the food parcels is a prime example of that. It's like they're obliged to offer these services, but it's like, well, how do we do this in the most cost effective manner? And it's got nothing to do with altruism whatsoever. It's gross, and that happens across all sorts of things. It's just, yeah. So I suppose that's where Blood and Butter was kind of coming from.
Yeah, it's these kind of structures that have been left in place by people with different intentions, and then they can't be exercised to their proper use when someone else who doesn't believe in them is trying to use them.
Yeah,
or being
absolutely.
forced to use them, rather.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I wanted to come back to what you were saying about, you wanted to explore dynamics in a slightly different way on this record, or continue exploring them in ways you kind of previously started off.
Yeah.
Is it easier to kind of get a shape of the record as a whole if you have intentions like that going in to kind of unify the songs and what you want to do with it?
I think so. Like, I mean, with this record, with Viscerals, it, like, more so than any other record, was one where Johnny wrote the kind of a lot of the riffs for, like, a few tracks. I basically came into the studio with almost fully formed songs. Sam and Adam did the same. Whereas, like, previous albums, it was more of a kind of, I guess, like, jamming sessions. We did more of that, which is a longer process. I'm not saying, like, either way is right or wrong for us, really. I mean, in some ways, probably that different approach to Viscerals is a reason why, another reason, aside from, like, the production, why we've got a different character out of it. But yeah, I don't know, in a sense of, like I said, I mean, Sam always has a very, very clear idea of the direction he wants to take the production and overall sound of the album, and he is very clever in the sense of, like, he'll pick out certain things he wants to do that will, production wise, that will be a thread throughout the entire album, and that's a key thing in giving the album an identity, I guess. Like, one of the things he did for this album was it was phenomenal, really. I went into Blank Studios one evening and he said, "Oh, come and have a look at this." And I went in the live room and he built, like, a really big plate reverb, basically a huge sheet of metal in, like, a wooden frame suspended on the wall, with contact mics on it. That's how they kind of used to do it in the 60s and 70s. So he built that specifically for this album, and he said, well, I want to put like a lot of the vocals through this. I want to use it, put a lot of the drums through it. So that's like all over the album, and that's one of the things that kind of gives it really strong and distinct identity, I guess.
I think you get a sense of that. You were saying that the riffs were kind of one of the first things you had. You get a sense of that from them too. They're kind of like the melodic heart of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's always how it works. Some songs, someone will just come in with like just one single riff, and we'll kind of all like pull out different ideas that we've got floating around in our brains that may work with that, and we'll piece the song together like that. But other songs like Rubbernecker, like Sam, pretty much he came in, he was like, I've written this song. Then we'll kind of jam it out in the studio and give our 2 cents of maybe what needs tweaking here and there, or how we can change it for the better. And then other songs will be like, sometimes, especially when we were kind of full throttle with gigging, like we've all got day jobs as well, so time was at a premium. We'd go away touring, and then we'd be straight back into our day jobs, and then we were away touring again. So actually, like, time to write records was at a premium, and then we've all got, personal lives on top of that, and partners and whatnot. So, there were certain instances where just Johnny and Chris would go into the practice room and just try and knock out a song, basically, just drums and bass, and that's how Reducer came about. They just went in, and that came together really quick, that one. And I think that kind of, you hear that in the song. I think there's a sense of it being like thrashed out, and that's exactly how it was written, and that's exactly how it should be performed as well. So
it's got a scrappy kind of punky spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like not really like a Stooges vibe, but that it's within that sort of parameter, I guess. Just to kind of foot to the floor and just go for it for 4 minutes. It's yeah.
That line as well, at the end of it on the outro, ego kills everything.
Yeah.
Is a recording studio kind of one of the few places in the world that when everything is going right, ego is completely absent?
I think both in the studio and in the live sense as well. It's a wonderful thing when you're performing live. And again, like in the studio, it's a wonderful thing where you hit the moments where you're no longer really consciously thinking, I'm performing in front of people, or I'm recording, so I've got to get this right. Or, as soon as you can clear that, it's a wonderful thing. And that's exactly that. They're the spaces that I always want to be in. But, it's not always possible. Sometimes you'll do a gig and you just like, you get like a lot of mental chatter throughout, and you're just like, oh God, not feeling as comfortable as you could. But if you can clear that and everything clicks, you just kind of feel at one with a lot of things, like the sound and the people in the audience. That's exactly where, and you're no longer thinking I am someone on stage performing. It's just like you're just there, and you're just existing with other people, and that's a really good thing.
Does that change your perspective on life outside of it in any way when you have an experience like that so frequently?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one thing that, and I've been reading like bits of Ram Dass like over the course of the pandemic, and one of these things that he tries to promote and teach is this idea that like everyone is a peer, so everyone's the same. Like, doesn't matter, and his thing is like, it doesn't matter who that person is. Like, you might think they're a total arsehole, but they're the same as you, and you're the same as them, and everyone's the same. Once you start to like view things in that way, from a music sense as well, like everything starts to become a lot easier, and you become a lot more open and receptive to things as well. It works really well for me because Like, I'm not bothered about sharing this, but I had like counselling sessions last year, and like one of the big things for me is that actually I've got quite low self-esteem. So sometimes if I'll like be speaking to someone who I perceive to be like an important person, or a person who has some amount of influence like over my life, it can make me a bit jumpy and nervous. As soon as you can kind of train your brain into thinking, no, they're like, yeah, I'm the same as that person, and that person, we're all level here. It makes things a lot easier. And likewise, like the other way around, there's absolutely, and this isn't something I don't think suffered from, but that sense of like, I'm more important than other people because I'm a musician on the stage and I'm playing to loads of people. But I mean, the music industry is obviously full of those people, but you spot them a mile off. Like, my radar for that kind of thing, I feel like is pretty good. So just try to avoid.
Yeah, they're not usually particularly subtle about it either.
No, well, it's just that sense of like, I suppose it's almost a lack of awareness of it as well. Like, I think it's important to remain very, very humble and appreciative of what's going on. And I think like certainly for like bands like us, and you talk to other bands at festivals and things, and like I shouldn't generalize, but sometimes you can definitely tell the difference between bands or musicians who have been at it a really long time, and they've just kind of played like small venues for years and years and years, maybe not even in that band, but and then suddenly something will happen for them, and more people will gravitate towards the music and take interest in it, which is a cool thing. And those pigs are kind of in that category as well, and we're just like, wow, this is amazing. The flip side of that is that you maybe get like young musicians or that all of a sudden just get like launched, like they just put like and that that's not a reflection. I'm not saying that that the music doesn't deserve, what they're doing isn't worthy of that. That's not what I'm saying at all. Like some young musicians are just some people are just naturally gifted and they'll just do it, and and it's like, wow, where'd you learn that? And they've just got it in them, but they just get propelled straight away, and they're straight away in that kind of, they're playing in front of huge audiences straight away, and they miss out like that kind of riding around in a transit van that could break down at any moment.
It humbles you.
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah, and I think sometimes you try and, I'm not going to name any names, but you try and speak to those people at festivals or wherever, and they're just like just looking at you like you're an alien. It's okay, I'll move on.
I mean, you get that as well. There were people who haven't even had any success in that way. Like it exists at all levels of the kind of
I suppose it does
system.
I suppose it's like I said, like back to that thing of like, where are your expectations and why are you doing this? Like, if your main aim is just to let off some steam and just like have a good time with as many people as possible, I don't think you can go far wrong with that objective. Just keep hold of that, and then whatever happens. Obviously you get like some musicians that are just like, okay, well, that band are doing that and we're better than them, so why is that not happening to us? And they may be better than that band, I don't know. I mean, music's completely subjective anyway, isn't it? I don't really subscribe to the notion that one kind of music is any better than the other, but yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Like expectations, I guess.
Yeah, comparison is the death of joy.
Oh yeah,
that's the expression, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a little bit about New Body as well, because at the heart of that song, you have that kind of chorus of "I don't feel a thing." Is crafting music from numbness harder? It's like a weird juxtaposition to be able to get something that's so steeped in an intense feeling from feeling nothing.
Yeah. It is hard. I mean, it's certainly, I'm sure most people have been riding various waves of kind of mental health stabilities over the past year or so. But yeah, it is difficult because, and the more I kind of think about the way that I create music and those kind of moments where I feel like I do the best work I can do musically, it's these times where it's going to sound weird, but I feel like music is this like it's this separate entity that like passes through you, and it just or maybe like inspiration for I don't know, maybe that's the wrong word, but it passes through you, and when it does, you've got to use it and seize it and value it because it's with you, and then it moves on and it goes elsewhere. And I find it very difficult when I find it very difficult to force myself to do things musically, because more often than not, if I kind of force myself into doing something, whether that's writing lyrics or writing riffs or whatever, I don't have that real sense of connection with it. Like I'll just look back at it and just pick it apart and just go, this isn't it. But then there's these other moments where I just wake up one morning and I just have this feeling. It's not even like an idea, a solid idea. It's not like lines for lyrics. It's nothing. It's just a feeling that I think today could be a day where I can do something, I can create something that I'll be proud of. And it's on those days where I've got to go, right, okay, I'll make some time to use this and do it. But on the flip side, some days it's just like, I suppose you've just got to kind of acknowledge mentally where you are and just be like, okay, if I try to, it's just not with me today. It's just not there. Yeah, it's a strange thing.
How often does it typically arrive?
It's inconsistent. I'll give it that. I mean, obviously, it's a different thing. I suppose I'm discussing this from a sense of like doing things from a solo perspective. Writing lyrics, I'll generally, that's something that I'll tackle on my own. But obviously, when you're in a sense of you're all in a room and you're able to bounce off each other, whatever that is, that inspiration, that source can be summoned a lot easier than whether you're just kind of at home on your own. But sometimes it can be with me for a couple of weeks, and then other times it's like, okay, it's gone and it just doesn't arrive, and you get a couple of days here and there where you're like, yes, I'm gonna do this today, and you do it, and I look back at it and I'm like, yeah, I'm really happy with that. I'm really proud of it. But yeah, it's just this sense of just waiting for it to arrive, which is an odd thing. I feel like I can't summon it. I can't provoke it. It just arrives, and then when it arrives, I've just got to take advantage of it.
It's interesting. It's a weird kind of juxtaposition because we think about, music being this thing that you create and you have a lot of control over.
Yeah.
But almost the force behind it, you're completely out of control of.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot to be said of just generally submitting to things anyway. It's quite nice. And then just... Because the flip side of that is if you're not submitting to it and you're trying to force it, it can become a very, very frustrating process. And I think, not, again, like, I don't want to beat anyone down, but like, when you get into like the upper echelons of like really hyper commercial music, like that's stuff that is like, people are financially very, very committed to it, and like things happening. And I think that's why a lot of it just sounds so like hollow and insipid, especially like really ultra commercial rock bands. It's because they're like, right, we have to do this. We need to make a new album now, and we need to write it. And it's just, I suppose it's just a completely different process, and it just becomes more forced, and you lose grasp of, the fundamental joy of it, I suppose. On the flip side, though, like I there's loads of commercial music that I really, really like. I like Miley Cyrus. Like, I think she's
good new album.
Yeah.
Good new album.
She's amazing. Like, her voice is just so powerful.
It's got such a nice tone to it now as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not encouraging smoking, but after like that much, it gives it such a kind of rich side to it that it didn't have before.
Yeah, she's incredible. So it's not the same across the board, I guess, but I do think that's kind of why a lot of, especially in rock music, it just really hyper commercial rock music just reeks of like, it's just vacuous.
I was thinking about this the other day, and I think it comes down to if you can hear the person's singular voice coming through. It's the same reason why, like, if you hear a band who are playing in a local venue that sounds exactly like Catfish and the Bottlemen, you don't dig it because it's not their voice; it's just something else. It's the same thing with like the hyper commercialized stuff. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I guess so. You're trying to replicate somebody else's expression, aren't you? And yeah, that doesn't often end well.
It's interesting, what you were saying earlier as well about trying to you have to give yourself to the inspiration almost completely. Is that almost like a religious thing in some ways? Like completely giving yourself to it? I don't know if I'm making a massive leap there though.
No, like, I'm not religious in the sense of, traditionally religious, but I do think there's kind of otherworldly things that I certainly don't comprehend, or at least some amount of like connectivity within the world that is there to be, you can kind of, I don't know, you can kind of, if you're open to it, you tap into it, and it's almost like sometimes ideas will just be like, it feels like they're thrown at me rather than something that is, I've thought up. It's almost like like I shouldn't have a writing credit on on certain things, But like, I'll wake up sometimes just bang in the middle of the night and just have like a couple of sentences just there in my mind that, I mean, it's kind of annoying because I've got to then make use of those and kind of get up and write them down. Because, there's been instances where that's happened and I'll think, oh, wow, they're a great couple of lines. And then I'll go back to sleep, and in the morning I'll wake up and I'm like, I'm sure something happened in the middle of the night that I was meant to take note of. And yeah, so. But I suppose, then you're starting to get into the realms there of like, is it a spiritual thing, or is it just the kind of recesses of your subconscious mind kind of popping up? And I suppose that, like, I'm fascinated with like dreams and like the meanings behind dreams, or what are they, what is like, especially like the really vivid ones that are just so strange, and you wake up thinking like, what on earth, like, because that's something that your brain is creating, that, right? Like, it is creating these like films in a way in your mind, but you're you're part of them. You're the actor. But
it's like virtual reality.
Yeah, but you don't understand them fully. Like, sometimes they're just like so abstract that you're like, what on earth am I trying to tell myself? And why isn't your brain just saying, oh, you know what, you're worried about doing your tax return, so why is it presenting me? Why am I on a boat bobbing around in the middle of the ocean, like, with, like, sardines hanging off my eyelids or whatever? Do you know what I mean? It's like, and then you, like, maybe look up, like, certain dream symbology meanings and things like that, and, like, all the, like, they're things that are from, like, just kind of collated from all different cultures across the world. But quite often there are threads there, and you look at it and you're like, oh wow, yeah, the sardines. Yeah, I am worried about. I'm actually worried about doing my tax return if sardines happen to represent some amount of clerical admin work that you're putting off. I don't know, but I just find that kind of thing fascinating. I think with the next album, that's something I'm going to try and lean on a bit in terms of like a topic or a theme throughout the album. I think.
You touch on it a little bit on Hell's Teeth, I think, don't you? You've kind of got the reference to star signs.
Yeah, I do. The general gist of that song is kind of just that kind of notion of just people getting on with their lives, and if they find comfort and solace in anything like that, star signs or my sense dream symbology or anything, if that's what you're interested in, cool, just go for it and enjoy it, as long as it's not like the kind of QAnon stuff whereby there's like real sinister undertones to that and it's like pure manipulation of people. But if it's not that sort of thing, then yeah, cool.
Everything always has extremes. Like, it always gets out of control in some way. Everything that kind of starts off as a good thing.
True, yeah. I mean, you look at any sort of major religion and yeah, it's all been completely commandeered, hasn't it? And just pulled apart and reconstructed, and most, well, I'm no expert, but a lot of religions have got really nice positive messages, but then you look at the structure of the establishments that, yeah, like I say, commandeered those religions, it starts to become a bit sad, actually. I think.
I think it's the problem with a lot of political systems as well, is they run on this assumption that humans are going to be good, and it's always the kind of human nature of the slightly more sinister aspects of our makeup that ultimately end in these things kind of collapsing a little bit. Look at the Catholic Church, it's like,
yeah, that's a force of its own, isn't it? But yeah, but that's not to say, it's weird, isn't it? Because you look at things, especially like that, like the Catholic Church, where it's just like it's almost like it's like a corporation in a way, isn't it? And a lot of money from the very top does not trickle down. But then you look at the sort of the ground level of things and the grassroots things. Yeah, people can believe in whatever they want to believe. That's cool, and have faith in whatever they want to believe. And you look at it on a community level, and there's a lot of good that certain churches or parishes will be doing fundraising or volunteering or just doing positive things with their religion. But then obviously on like a much more like global and societal things, you can quite easily see the damage that's being caused, I guess, or the tensions that it can stoke, especially in terms of like rights to abortion and things like that. It's a very complicated thing, isn't it? I'm always keen to not like seem like I'm coming across as just like completely like bashing religion, because that's not my intention at all. Like, there's a lot of good people. Like I've known people that are like deeply religious people, Catholics, and they're good people by all means. And it would be unfair for me to kind of express like, oh well, your religion is crazy and destroying the world or whatever. It's not as simple as that, I don't think.
Well, that would be discrimination, wouldn't it? That's the kind of basis that racism and stuff runs on.
Yeah.
You wonder where people are going to get their kind of moral compasses from, though, as religion fades. Because that's one of the really positive aspects of it, is that it is this thing you can kind of center your life around in a really positive way.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like in terms of society and the way we kind of interact with each other anyway, like outside of religion, it feels like it's becoming so fragmented and so intense at times. I think, you know, a lot of my feelings on that come from kind of observation of how people are behaving on social media and things like that. And it's something that I've kind of become more aware of, and I try not to just kind of lose my shit on social media. And I've tried to like just rein it in a bit, like my usage of it. You know, it's quite low at the moment. I'll just kind of go on, I'll post things and maybe look at a couple of things that like very close friends are doing, and then kind of jump back out of it. So, you know, well, for a couple of reasons. One, because like I find that it can like trigger me quite easily emotionally. So if I'm just like scrolling through Twitter and then all of a sudden I'll read something and it'll make me raging or it'll make me anxious, you know, and I'll close the app, and that emotion stays with me for a while. And I was in a fairly balanced place before that happened. So, well, why am I putting myself through that? Like, not to say that it's not important to like stay connected with current affairs, you know, especially from like a political sense, and an analytical sense, like, and a critical sense. That's important. Like, that's important for everyone to have. But this kind of, I don't know, just shouting into the void on Twitter, I don't know how beneficial that is for people. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, back to your point of the kind of religion and the where does that moral compass come from? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've looked at the, you know, I don't know what gets taught in primary schools anymore. It might be, you know, it might be something that is done in primary school a little bit more than leaning into religion. You might just be, if you go to a nice school, your teachers, you know, teach you how to behave responsibly and like a human should behave, and be empathetic and things like that.
Yeah, you wonder if, I mean, like, if you think about something on the record like Crazy in Blood, you're looking at like the really extreme, kind of hyperbolized forms of religious worship to a degree, or you kind of, there's a motif of it, but you almost wonder if it's just going to get watered down until it's almost like children's stories that are used with a good moral at the centre of it. In the same way that you tell people Aesop's fables, you know, the Bible might become that.
Yeah, maybe so. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Something to think about on the next record.
Just don't know. Yeah, I just take everything at face value at the moment. Anyway, even just like the past few years, just kind of trying to think not too far ahead in the future, because my imagination can make things seem a lot crazier than they actually might be when you get to that moment in the future. You know, it's sometimes I think like the mass anxiety around something that can happen or will happen in the future is actually, even if that thing's a bad thing, but the mass hysteria and anxiety it causes on an individual level, but that's happening to so many people, I think sometimes that is just as big a problem as whatever the issue is that people are focusing on that is triggering that anxiety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've come kind of full circle.
Yeah.
Like what we were speaking about at the beginning about it, the impact that it has on the individual and the internal.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, it's worrying, but you know.
Was that where the motif on the record came from in relation to, like, kind of, you're speaking about blood a lot, and I think you talk about guts in the last song, like internal things?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's just a kind of a metaphor for that sort of stuff. And also, I quite liked this notion of like blood and guts and things, like they're things that are horrific to see, you know, if there's an accident, or even if you just put on the telly and, you know, there's horrible programs that like document people having surgery and things, and you just like switch on the television and all of a sudden you see someone's intestines
inside A&E.
Yeah, and you go, whoa, that's horrible. I kind of quite like the notion of like, yeah, that those kind of organs and blood being these are things that are like physically very, very important because you need them to function well in order to exist well and lead a healthy life. But also, the same token, your emotions are just as important, and your psychological well-being is just as important, and recognizing and kind of doing things on that level to kind of keep yourself healthy, like in your mind, is just as important as the bodily things. And also this kind of like idea of, just as I said, like, when you see someone's intestines, you're gonna recoil a bit. And this overspill of emotion that people can have that also can make other people just recoil, and also make the person who's boiling over recoil as well, in regret or guilt or shame or whatever. It's so I kind of liked the comparisons between those two.
Yeah. Speaking of bodily things as well, what would we find located on your left calf?
Oh. A really ridiculous tattoo that I got when, let's just say I wasn't feeling very good. I shouldn't. The person who did the tattoo and did the design, she's a friend. So, and the objective, I'm sure the objective when she designed it was like, this will make people smile. And that was my reasoning for getting it. It's like the outline of some buttocks, and it says above and below it says complete arsehole. The word hole is crossed out, so it kind of says complete arse. That's what is on my left calf.
Was this a drunken tattoo?
No, it wasn't. Like I said,
it wasn't sober.
I was feeling quite low at the time, just going through some bit like personal things. I saw that she posted that on Instagram saying it was available, and it was just so impulsive. It made me laugh, and then I was like, I'm gonna get that. That'll be funny. So I got that, and you know what? It did cheer me up. And usually, when people clock it and read it, it makes them laugh as well, and I think that's a really nice thing. So I'm quite happy to have it, really, and I'm glad it wasn't just a drunken thing that I regret. There was some amount of like thought put into it, but
bringing a little bit more joy into the world.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, in my own strange, peculiar little way. Yeah.
Just like pigs. Was that 7? Almost 7, maybe 6.
It doesn't matter. I don't count anymore. After the year we've had, I'm definitely not counting.